Wednesday morning meeting of the Criminal Justice Committee to order. January 13th, 2020. Start with roll call.
Mr. Hess?
Present.
Mr. Long?
Present.
Mr. Lear? Mr. Lear?
Present.
Mr. Snipes? Ms. Peters?
Present.
Ms. Parker?
Present.
Mr. Fairfield?
Present.
Mr. Carrico?
Present.
Mr. Eckhoff?
Present.
Mr. Darrell Smith?
Present.
Mr. Kirkstrad?
Present.
Mr. Hunter? Mr. Collins?
Present.
Mr. Kenneth Smith?
Present.
Mr. Wheeler?
Present.
Mr. Searay?
Present.
We have a quorum.
I have not received anything for public comment. Have you received anything, Kelly? No, so nothing for public comment. I'd like to entertain a motion to combine and approve the minutes from December 9th, the circuit clerk's report, grand jury report, public defender's report, probation report, the coroner's monthly report, the coroner's monthly receipts. Combine them and make a motion.
Peters.
Mr. Long with a motion and Ms. Peters for a second. And we will vote on that later. Okay, Chief Judge. I don't see Judge Kramer here. Move on to the circuit clerk's office. Ms. Cianci.
Good morning. So the end of period listing report that we have, where we disperse all the money, if anybody has any questions with any of that, that's usual, customary, nothing different. The collection report for the state's attorney's office, they did pretty well this last year with $120,479.69. So as you can see, their collections were slow as well for the month of December, as was the Harris & Harris collection was only 26, almost 27,000. So it was a slow month collection-wise, but you know, with the pandemic, that's the best that we can expect, I'm sure.
Any questions on the report for Ms. Cianci? Computerization update, Sandy?
So for the computerization update, as far as the e-filing is going, they are ready to start testing again. I think they took a little bit of a hiatus during the holidays or whatever. I did have a conference call with both vendors, but separately, different phone calls. I have some thoughts that I'm sharing with the Chief Judge right now on future endeavors, and as soon as we have, you know, a plan together, we'll be in touch with that. So that's pretty much all I have at the moment.
Any questions for Ms. Cianci? Mr. Hunter.
Hey, good morning. How are you? Happy New Year to you.
Thanks, you too.
Good. How's COVID in your office now? How's that? How many people are off?
None.
Okay, good. Glad to hear
Yeah,
that.
we have lightened that up quite a bit.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Sandy? Okay, thank you,
Very
Sandy.
good. Thank you.
Up next, the State's Attorney, Mr. Rowe.
Good morning, everyone. Did they already vote to adopt the reports?
We've got to combine, and we're going to vote at the end, Jim.
Okay. All right, then I'll get right to it. For the year ending 2020, we had 854 felonies that were charged. I believe it was, let me get that number, 384 went through the grand jury. The remainder of them, it means they were charged and had preliminary hearings. That's a substantial drain, as you can imagine, on the resources and the time at the courthouse. That means each case, if there's not a waiver of the preliminary hearing, goes to hearing. So you've got to bring officers in, have them testify. They're subject to cross-examination. So again, I just want to thank the Public Defender's Office for working with us on that, coordinating schedules to make that flow easily. Normally, all 852 of those felony cases would have gone through the grand jury. So you can imagine adding almost, 470 cases to the court call over the course of the year, and really just from April to December, when we had to shut down grand jury, created quite a drain. So it was good to have their cooperation. Our first grand jury of the year, we had 50 cases went through. That's a significant number as well, but again, there was a backlog of some from 2020, so I don't expect to be doing 50 going forward. So that would cover both grand jury reports. Anyone have any questions on those?
Mr. Snipes,
Good morning, Jim.
pull your mic over.
Good morning, Jim.
Morning.
I'm looking at the grand jury indictments, and I'm noticing that Bradley and Babonis, when you add those two together, their numbers kind of either match or exceed Kankakee, but Kankakee has at least 20 indictments. Given the similarity into the numbers, what do you contribute to the rise in the city of Kankakee versus practically every other county? Some that has at least 4 that has zeros, and most of them are ones. But when I'm looking at these two comparators, it looks like there's a rising concern in the city.
Well, of course, you have an increased population in the city, but it's not really a rise. City has always kind of led the pack when you look historically over the grand jury numbers. There's more cases that come out of the city. In Bradley, your felonies that come through, the majority of their felonies over the course of a year are either going to be ag DUIs, because they're very aggressive with their DUI enforcement, which we appreciate, or you're going to have a lot of felony retail thefts. And those are usually individuals who were offered a diversion program option, refused it, so the case is ultimately charged. When we look in cities' felony numbers, you're going to see, probably very few ag DUIs, few felony retails, but you're going to see more of the narcotics cases and firearm cases. So historically, that's just kind of been the numbers. It's not a sudden rise where city suddenly has twice as many as Bourbonnais or Bradley. That's been pretty consistent over the years. And it probably goes back to, lack of social services programs, and there's just more crime in the city of Kankakee. That's probably a conversation you'd have to have maybe with local law enforcement, the churches, the schools, families, parents.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Hunter.
Jim, good morning to you. Couple things.
Morning.
I don't know if I remember discussing with you the homicides in the county. I don't know if it was you or if Sheriff Downey. If my memory serves me correctly, there were 10 last year, 80% of which were in the city of Kankakee. And I'd like to hear your comments on that. Additionally, when it seems like every month there's some kind of initiatives that you've taken with respect to bringing in soft money over and above your allocated funds for the general fund, which helps us, and there's only a small amount that we have to match, and we appreciate that. And it's my understanding that you're always looking for money to provide services that will help the citizens and the reduction of crime, incorporating social services issues that help the constituents, working with our youth, interfacing in the various communities with activities. My question is, the first one regarding the 80% of the murders happening in the city of Kankakee, and also it seems like you have a philosophy of operating outside the box of the general parameters of elected officials, and I'd like to hear maybe your philosophy on that.
Well, I can't, I know right now we've got, I think the other day we looked at the numbers, we've got about 45 cases pending in the county that are either murder or attempt murder cases. That's a significant number. I talked with Jim Glasgow out of Will County, and per capita, our numbers are way over theirs. So that's definitely concerning. I don't know what percentage of those cases have come out of city versus other communities. I can get those numbers for everyone, at the next meeting. The role of a state's attorney's office, at its core is to prosecute crime. There's nothing in the statute that tells us we need to be involved in any of the other programs we choose to, because we look at the bigger picture of public safety, crime reduction, try to keep kids out of the system, keep them from going down that path. So, that's really the basis for many of our initiatives. But until the parents, quite frankly, until parents start parenting, we're probably going to see these trends continue. That we can offer social services. We're trying to get behavioral health services into the courthouse, so kids can go to that right before, after their court date. We're working on so many of these initiatives, but it ultimately comes down to what's happening in the home and what's happening in the streets. And that's going to be parents, law enforcement, and the community. It's been a struggle. This last year has been tough. Many of our initiatives kind of got put on pause because of COVID, as many things across the state did. But I'll tell you one thing that's going to lead to probably seeing those numbers increase dramatically, especially the violent crime, is the Senate bill that passed this morning. It's 760 pages long. It's filed at 4 a.m. It's debated at 5 a.m. and it's passed before 6 a.m. So probably nobody in Springfield read the entire bill. Thankfully, our state rep, our state senator Joyce, neither of them voted for it. Our other state senator from the northeast corner of our county, he was drafted the bill. But that's the cash bail reform. I'm afraid it's going to lead to more violent people being released back into our community pre-trial.
He's not lying.
It's going to be very hard to get them back into custody. I don't know. We're just starting to read through it. I just got it about an hour and a half ago. And, for instance, so if someone commits a crime that is not punishable by mandatory prison, so if it's eligible for probation, which many offenses are in Illinois, whether we like it or not, sex offenses, violent domestic battery cases, all of that is punishable by an option of probation. So they're not going to be detained unless the state can articulate a specific threat to a specific person. Well, some states' attorneys articulated, if someone kills 10 people, you no longer pose a threat to those 10 people because they're dead. So now the burden falls on the state to be able to identify another, the 11th victim, I suppose, that the individual poses a threat to. Otherwise, they're going to be released on pretrial conditions, which is going to have to be enforced by our probation department. Additional resources are going to have to go into that. And if they violate those pretrial conditions, one of the options the judge has is basically to give them a written or verbal warning, like a stern talking to. Don't do it again. One person gave an example that you'd almost have to have someone commit 2 drive-by shootings before you could finally hold them pre-trial. So I'm frustrated with it. I don't know if you can tell by my voice. I'm very upset over what I was reading this morning in the bill. Sure, there's some things in there that are good, but I think there's a whole lot of bad. Thankfully, none of those pretrial bail reform conditions go into effect until 2023, so we've got some time to sort through it, see what it really, translates to. But just a Cliff Notes reading of it, it's scary because I think we're going to have a hard time now keeping the most violent of criminals in our community behind bars. So it's tough to provide for public safety when we're putting them right back out on the street.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that that omnibus bill, which is, they have everything. If you guys don't know what that means, a lot of stuff is lumped into one bill. I myself, I think I may have even sent a text to Sheriff Downey with respect to separating some of that stuff. And I also had a conversation with Senator Joyce, And I know that Senator Joyce and Algie Sims and the sheriff had a Zoom meeting or something on that. It may have been a rush to judgment regarding that. And as you indicated, Jim, that stuff may not impact or take effect until 2023. However, maybe that leaves us some time to address it. In addition to the organization that Sheriff Downey's involved in, the Illinois Sheriff's Association, I know they're quite adamant. I'm sure the FOP and people in the community. I understand what the environment is regarding police reform. However, somebody mentioned, I don't know if it was you, Jim, when we were discussing this, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but there's going to have to be, a meeting of the minds on this particular matter. And as you've articulated, this was expedited, and I'm not really sure if they had the requisite amount of hearings. I heard there were some hearings this summer, but everybody was in lockdown this for the last 9 months, and who was there to really bring up the issues that the state's attorney has brought up, as well as, I heard the rumblings of the sheriff, our own sheriff as well too. So guys, take a look at that. Take a look at it and talk to Jackie and talk to Pat about it.
I don't think anyone is opposed to, good reform, safe reform. We all can look at the criminal justice system and see areas for improvement. But to rush this through the way it was done, to file a bill, a 700 and something page bill, and then have debate and a vote on it within an hour and a half. Not to have anyone at the table from law enforcement, from your social services, from your DV associations, your sexual assault associations, on a bill that's filed at 4 a.m. And they ram it through, and now we've all got to live with it in our community. It's tragic. It really is. And I'm not going to pretend to speak on the law enforcement, the police reforms. I saw some stuff in there about the military surplus vehicles, body cameras required for everyone. I'm sure when the sheriff gets a chance to read through it, if he hasn't already, he can touch on some of that. But a lot of reforms in that bill that become unfunded mandates, and it's going to really tax local resources. In addition, I know we're going to see an increase in crime. It's inevitable under this new law.
Sheriff, do you want to make a comment now, or you want to wait till you get up here?
No, hold on.
Okay. Mr. Snipes.
Jim, just one other question. At the swipe of a pen, almost 8,000 people were pardoned, that had the, what I call the low-end drug-related offense. How would that impact our county?
We've been doing that since 2017. So I don't know how many people it would have been done under the governor's swipe of the pen, but we really beat the state to the punch on that. Judge Elliott has been tremendous in working with those cases. She handles all of the expungement and sealing offenses, allows them all to go through her courtroom, reviews each one along with the prosecutors, the defense attorneys. Sandy Cianci, the circuit clerk, all of her staff have been great with processing that paperwork over the years. So I think we're really ahead of the game in that respect. Going forward, if someone hasn't been expunged or sealed yet, and they apply to the court and they're eligible for it, there's no objection from our office to that expungement or sealing.
Okay, so that means that at the swipe of a pen, that they still have to come in for expungement, or does it automatically expunge?
Well, that swipe of the pen wasn't really all that extensive if you look into it, because in some instances, felony cannabis cases couldn't be expunged or sealed, but it has to be at the discretion of the state's attorney. It's something the governor can't do. We're not objecting to those.
Okay.
So if people come in and they file for those, that's something they have to initiate. But again, we've probably done most of those over the past 4 years through our expungement and sealing clinics.
Oh, great job. Thanks.
Okay, moving on to the grand jury statistic report.
I touched on that before my tirade.
Truth doesn't lie.
Yeah, that was the number of felonies that were indicted and whatnot. We already talked about that. Did anyone have any questions on that?
Any questions? Okay, thanks, Jim.
All right, thank you.
Up next, Public Defender, Mr. Pentewick.
Good morning.
Good morning, Ed.
Do I start?
Yep.
Basically, the report speaks for itself. The courthouse is courthouse is open now other than for jury trials. So we're doing bench trials, hearings, plea bargains. The jail is bringing people over to the best of their ability to make this happen. So other than jury trials, we're back in business. So hopefully the cases will start moving. Beyond that, I have nothing specific to add to my report.
Any questions?
In su oficina. Anyway, I was asking you, do you have any abogados, any attorneys that speak Spanish or bilingual?
No, we do not.
Okay. And how do you recruit?
Basically, excuse me. Actually, I think there's been a pretty good amount of turnover in my office since I took over, and I've been able to fill the gaps with the qualified people, and I'm very happy about that. Basically, I just post for law schools and things like that. I got a pretty good chunk of applications. I think we talked about that last month. We also talked about how the people I've hired are local kids, or I call them kids, I shouldn't do that, but local individuals. They're actually going to be sworn in tomorrow by the Supreme Court or by the whatever authority is swearing them in, and they'll be duly licensed, and they've been working in a limited capacity up to that point, but I'm very happy to have them here. But basically, I get a good pool of candidates, and then I just have to make the decisions as to who I pick.
Okay, are there any of those people going to be sworn in, look like me, or swarthy complexion?
Chavez Rosenthal is a local individual. Yeah. He grew up in Kankakee, Northwestern Law School, and he's an African American. If that's your question, Mr. Hunter.
Yeah, that's solamente uno. That's only one. What about internships?
Interns, I have not looked into that lately. I know that there's been a turnover at KCC, and I know Ms. Bertrand, and I just haven't reached out to her. We talked about that last month, I think, Mr. Hunter. With COVID, it's kind of been up in the air, but definitely on the table. And prior to COVID, I was reaching out to ONU and KCC, and it just didn't come to happen.
But that's an activity in progress that's kind of put on hold?
It needs to be, yes, it needs to be reinitiated, basically.
Okay. I'll be revisiting that subject.
Understood.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Ed, if I'm not mistaken, both of Gina Jones and Chavez Rosenthal were actually interns in your office before.
Not Mr. Rosenthal. Not Mr. Rosenthal. Ms. Jones was, though.
Ms. Jones was, okay.
Mr. Chairman? Oh, go. Who is it? Mr. Lear?
Steve Lear.
Okay, yes, Mr. Lear.
Ed, have the COVID cases out at Jerome had any impact on your ability to handle cases?
I mean, of course. We can't go down there and have a face-to-face visit. That was one of my big things when I took over, was to increase face-to-face visits, because I think it helps move the cases. You know, when you have a rapport with your client, you got a much greater likelihood of a negotiation or just a meaningful, conversation. Right now, it's just not feasible. It's not practical. We can't do it. The sheriff did provide us with iPad, or whatever you call it, and our investigator uses that tool. They've given us unlimited phone access to our clients, which has been fantastic. We can basically, in some ways, it's better because we can just sit at our office and make call after call after call, and that works. But at the end of the day, it has, it doesn't help, obviously, Mr. Lear, but the sheriff and everybody is definitely being as accommodating as possible with us. So, we're making the best of it right now.
Thank you.
Mr. Snipes.
Looking at your public defender's report, I'm looking at some of the lawyers that are involved. I see Brazel. That should be Tony Brazel. Is that?
It's his son, Trey Brazel.
Oh, his Traven. Okay. So most of these individuals are full-time?
Actually, it's Mr. Brazel, Mr. Boyd, Mr. O'Brien, Mr. Lawson, Mr. Parrish, Ms. Gowdy, Ms. Meyer, they are all part-timers.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
And it gets kind of murky because in juvenile court, I think part-timers benefit us in juvenile court because of the conflict cases and the fact that we represent multiple parties. We can represent both parents, we can represent the child, we have a guardian ad litem. So that's where Ms. Meyer, Ms. Gowdy, and Mr. Parrish are down in juvenile court, so that's a good fit. The other part-timers allow us some degree of flexibility, but you know, I think I've talked about this before. I think logistically, it's better to have as many full-time people as possible. You know, Ms. Jones's caseload's already gone up dramatically. Mr. Rosenthal is going to go up dramatically. I'm assigning him numerous cases. They're here 24 hours a day, or not 24 hours a day, but 8 hours a day. And I think it's a benefit for the system and for the office because that is their primary and sole responsibility. I want to make it really clear that I believe the part-timers do a fantastic job and they work well and they handle their caseload effectively. But at the end of the day, it's just a you know, it's a numbers situation.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, we have the probation department, Mr. Latham.
Good morning. Get a signature from you, Andy. That's what.
Go ahead.
Just to start out with a few of our 2020 totals. The totals in 2020 compared to 2019, our contacts decreased by about 3,400, or about 11%, all due to COVID. I don't believe 11% is that bad when you consider how COVID's impacted our operations. And our staff, our division supervisors, in both Kankakee and Iroquois offices did a great job making sure that we properly monitored people, stayed in contact, we didn't lose anybody, and dealing with constant changes to department operations and our supervision standards. They've done a great job, and hopefully this will get back to normal within the next, soon, and we can get back to how we normally did things, more face-to-face type contacts, more in the field contacts. As you can see on their drug testing, was very difficult last year with COVID, decreasing from over 3,600 collected in 19 to only about 1,439 last year. In 21, to ensure that doesn't happen again, we've contracted with Dwayne Dean to collect most of our drug testing, especially with the adult population moving forward. When COVID started, we started looking at labs around the area that could help us, that have a better setup for collecting these tests. They have a room dedicated for collecting urine tests. There's a barrier between the collector and the person providing the sample that we just don't have. In the annex, we collect it in the public restroom upstairs in the upper level, and it's just not as safe as it could be. But we think with this, that even if we were hit with some sort of COVID pandemic issue again, that the drug testing won't fall off. So we hope, and that's being paid for mostly by grant money. So we think that'll work. We're still searching for other labs to help us out, other partners. And because that was a big fall off in 20 because of COVID. And lastly, just in last year, our GPS use tripled, as just kind of obvious why. And so I assume that'll still continue to be used throughout this year at a higher level, I should say.
Any questions, Mr. Snipes?
Just a question. During COVID, with the employees that you do have out on the streets to basically monitor these individuals in their homes or wherever, what safeguards are in place to protect them, or do they just have electronic devices where they can detect from their car that someone is in the
Well, the electronic monitoring we can view from our office to see where someone's at and what they've done and where they've gone. We have out in the field, it's been tricky. It's hard for these officers to enter the home and check what's going on in the house, that they're in compliance, from sex offenders to whoever. You can't walk in there and see, is there children's toys? Is there other things you don't like what you see? And it's basically done from outside, and it's not a home visit in the way that it's not as effective as it could be. But it's hard to also say enter the home, go inside, and put the officer possibly at risk. So it's more done as, you know, you don't want to pull up on the curb and just wave to them. You got to do more than that. You got to enter the house and see what's going on.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
And lastly, and I discussed last year about that we received 4 funded positions for a pretrial program that was part of the Bail Reform Act of 18. And to start really develop a pretrial supervision program, that those individuals are hired. We filled them about a year ago this week. We had the program up and running, then obviously COVID hit and really impacted the court schedules and everything. Now, I believe in this coming year, those numbers were going to increase dramatically, and this is before the latest legislation went through. When Jim emailed me this morning. So what that's going to do with our numbers in pretrial, I can't even begin to. And remember, everybody that's on pretrial, we go out to the jail, we do a bond report every morning. We have people that arrive early to the office, pretrial officers that go out and do a report, as I've explained before, come back, and then there's a supervision component of all this. And it's going to be, I can't imagine where those numbers will be in a few years. Also, if it's going to, I'm scared that someone's going to be placed on pretrial, violate pretrial, be taken into custody for that violation, and let out the next day back on super duper pretrial. And if it's just that going around it, the pretrial is a very good program, and it can do great things. It can help a lot of people. It can get people out of custody that could remain in the community. But if it's what I'm thinking it's going to be, it's going to lose that. It's going to lose that. It's going to be impossible. It's just going to be shuffling paperwork and monitoring these people over and over again. I haven't read it, obviously. The 700 whatever pages of it. We'll do that, and the other issues in the bill, if there is, that impact our office, I don't even know yet. So we'll soon find out as we get through it. But I'll keep everyone updated, because I think pretrial will be our area going forward. That's going to be.
Mr. Hunter.
Just a comment, Tom. I know I've talked with the chairman, and I've talked with Senator Joyce as well as Representative Haas, and at some point they're going to be coming to this body, and they probably need to hear an earful. I know that they've heard from Sheriff Downey and the State's Attorney Jim Rowe, and I've talked to the Senator as well too about it. So, hopefully the interested parties and the stakeholders, especially guys like you, will articulate what your concerns are and remedies, to that bill.
Yeah, in the past, we've gotten letters out to everybody. I've sent letters out to everybody that I could regarding it, and this happened so quick, really. I mean, it was just.
So that's the problem.
I have a 3-hour, well, it's probably going to be a 3-hour Zoom call this afternoon about this. A lot of it will be about this, and nobody knows the impact, really. You have to read it, and it's a lot of unknowns out there right now. So not just on the no cash bail part of it that's going to impact pretrial. It's the other stuff.
Any other questions or comments for Tom? Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, the sheriff, Mr. Downing. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
How's your blood pressure?
You know what? If I say something inappropriate, you'll know it's bad. Thanks for the glasses, Tom. All right. So you should have the monthly report. Really, the number of inmates we have has stayed fairly consistent, both local and out of county. So there's not much change there. Transports are down at least to Chicago. If you see the month of December, we had no transports to Chicago for the feds and no transports to Chicago for ICE. Those are done via video, which has been very helpful. But again, it's related to COVID, so we don't know when that'll change. I would imagine that we'll still, when people are getting sentenced or whatever in federal court, they will go to Chicago. So obviously we'll keep an eye on that. The one thing it has helped is it has helped our vehicle situation as far as mileage. We're not traveling every day to Chicago, so that has slowed down a little bit. If you look at the sentenced inmates under C, last year we sent 93 inmates to DOC and we returned 419 to Kankakee County. So far in 2021, we've sent 15 to DOC and 10 have returned from DOC. So those numbers will should stay pretty consistent as they usually do. Traffic-wise, if you look down on the sworn section, there's some positive things in there. Some probably related to COVID, but any positive things we certainly will take. Our accidents are down in 2020 from 494 last year to 426 this year. We've increased the amount of warnings and citations in 2020, and our fatal accidents in the county are actually down from 24 to 13 this year. So those are certainly positives. Again, as I've said before, one fatal accident is too many, but anytime we can see a reduction, we look at that as a positive. We have a significant increase in calls for service in our sworn side, and that is attributed to our guys that are out, that are checking businesses, doing business checks, being as proactive as they can within the county's jurisdiction. Revenue, you can see the housing is consistent. The housing number is consistent, at least with last year. And our salary reimbursement, you can see is a little bit high because we've had, in the month of December, we had 3 inmates, 2 feds and 1 local, who were hospitalized for various issues. One actually was in Loyola, which meant that we had to send corrections to Loyola to sit on that individual. But they are all back, and it was all 3 were non-COVID related. So questions on the report?
I have one comment on the warrants for 2019 and 2020. You know, you got 2,069 for 19, and we're down 600.
Yeah, I think those are arrests. I know those aren't issued; those are arrests.
Okay. Mr. Hunter.
Sheriff, I just have one kind of ancillary question. You know, are there any pending sedition or related investigations involving the FBI regarding the actions last Wednesday in DC?
None that we are involved in.
Okay. Are you aware of any FBI investigations locally involving any residents of?
Not that they've shared with us, and if there were, I probably couldn't tell you anyway.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on the report? Anybody on Zoom?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lear.
and not on the report so much, but from the response I got from the public defender, Sheriff, I think it looks like your office is doing the most appropriate accommodations you can with the situation you have with COVID. So I applaud what you've done in an entirely difficult situation.
Yeah, thank you. And, you know, of course, you know, the key to any sort of success is everybody working together. Ed's office has been very accommodating as well. We certainly understand that every inmate in our custody is entitled to a defense, and we certainly want to allow Ed's staff as much access as we possibly can, while at the same time keeping them safe as well as the inmates safe. So, again, it's about working together, and I think everybody in this county does a good job of that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Moving on to the surplus phones.
Yeah, as you know, we replaced our phone system, which was about 16 years old, I guess now. And those phones are, I hate to use the term junk, but that's probably the easiest description. We have checked around to see if they could be used somewhere else, and we have gotten nothing. So we are going to declare them surplus, and we will hang on to them for a short time to see if there's anybody that can actually use them, but we don't believe there is. If you recall, this is a phone system that we were searching eBay to get parts for, and those parts have now been pretty much non-existent. So those phones were replaced, and you should have a list of
Yes, they have a list of all
the serial numbers of all the phones. So
Some of these have the rotary dial on them yet.
they're not that old.
Mr. Wheeler.
Is that a motion to make surplus?
Yeah, we need a separate motion.
Yeah.
Mr. Wheeler makes a motion, Mr. Long second. Okay, we'll take a roll call vote on that. Oh, Mr. Snipes.
And now these are the ones that's got the serial numbers and the county numbers. Is this what we're referring to, or what is these numbers here?
I don't know what numbers they put on there.
Okay.
Those are probably the serial numbers to the phones.
Oh, okay, so it's these many phones?
No, there is, if you look, so there is a serial number on one side, and then there's a county number on the other side.
Right.
So some don't have county numbers, why I don't know, but it looks like they're both serial numbers and county numbers.
So all these are phones,
Every phone's jail. So understand that includes the jail, the coroner, the sheriff's administration. So yeah, they're all phones.
DOC.
EOC, yeah, EOC. I mean, EOC. There's 30 phones. There's one phone at each station. So
roll call vote.
Mr. Hess,
Aye.
Mr. Long,
Aye.
Mr. Lear,
Aye.
Mr. Snipes,
Aye.
Ms. Peters,
Aye.
Ms. Parker,
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield,
Aye.
Mr. Carrico,
Aye.
Mr. Eckhoff,
Aye.
Mr. Darrell Smith,
Aye.
Mr. Kirkstrad,
Aye.
Mr. Hunter, Mr. Collins, Mr. Kenneth Smith,
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler, motion carries.
Up next is COVID update.
yeah, as most of you are probably aware, we had our first bout of COVID at Jerome Combs, following an earlier bout at the downtown facility. Fortunately, the COVID protocols and procedures that have been in place at both facilities since March has helped limit the spread. In one housing unit, over 40 of 62 inmates tested positive. As of today, all have recovered. Fortunately, minor symptoms. We did transport 3 different individuals out of that housing unit to the hospital for low oxygen levels, which is also part of our protocol. So if their oxygen level, according to our medical staff, if oxygen levels get to a point where they're below a certain number, then they bring them to the emergency room for treatment. They were brought there. I think one spent a couple days in the hospital, another one spent a day in the hospital, the other one went to the ER and returned. They have also recovered.
That's overtime too, right? You gotta have an officer there with them.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I've told this committee several times that COVID in our facility was inevitable. We were COVID-free for 8 months, which I don't know how you look at that, but I think that's pretty good, considering we did not stop taking new arrests. So we were taking people off the street. You know, we were able to quarantine them in a different housing unit before they moved to our general population. So that certainly helped significantly. Our corrections staff and medical staff have done outstanding work dealing with this pandemic, providing PPE additional cleaning, and increased sanitizing. I've heard people on the national level, when talking about inmates and COVID, they declare that being in jail shouldn't be a death sentence. I would contend that working there shouldn't be a death sentence either. Nowhere have I heard any of those who advocate for inmates advocate for the safety of our corrections staff or deputies, who I consider frontline workers. I know the argument is that the corrections staff choose to work there. It is their choice to work there. I realize that some people won't want to hear this, but guess what? Those who are in custody made their choice to be there. We all make personal choices every day. And unfortunately, we are now in a not my fault society, where accountability and personal responsibility no longer matter when it comes to criminal justice. And that's all I'm going to say on the COVID, unless you have any questions.
Mr. Snipe.
Yeah, Sheriff, on the other flip of that, how have, with the number of COVID cases that you have with the inmates, what were the numbers of our employees?
So we tested a number. Fortunately, we have a rapid test system, which, you know, obviously people question its accuracy sometimes. We tested a number of our staff, and I don't have the specific number of positives, but I know that some were negative. But one of the things that we did is in that housing unit where obviously the outbreak occurred, so the employees who worked in that housing unit over a 2 or 3 day period remained in that housing unit if they didn't exhibit any symptoms, but they were already exposed. So they continued to work there. So we did not take a different staff member every shift and move to that housing unit. So it was kind of a puzzle to try to make sure that we didn't expose people that that didn't need to be exposed. And the jail administration did a really good job with it. So we have had some positive employee tests on both sides. We've had a couple deputies who have tested positive as well for other reasons, not from the jail. But so yeah, it has impacted our staffs certainly. But for the most part, from what I know, they were minimal symptoms, much like the inmates.
All right, being that they are essential workers, my concern was if you had some that were tested positive, how would you be able to meander that staff so that they could?
When this outbreak occurred, it obviously affected, because there was a number of people off because of a combination of, being positive. So that certainly created some additional overtime as well. But that's all, we're back to normal as such that it could be.
Good job.
Thanks.
Anything else on the COVID, Mr. Long?
Thank you. I just wanted to
move your microphone over, sir.
I just wanted to comment that it seems like you've done a great job, 8 months without COVID, and it seems like it's under control in the jail. But speaking of not taking new prisoners, have we seen any signs of being reimbursed by the state of Illinois for the prisoners that we held on to for months?
No, that is still a pending lawsuit. So they will not address that until the court case is done.
Thank you.
That was going to be one of my questions, but thank you. He probably already knew that, though.
I did.
Okay.
I was ready for it.
House Bill 163.
Well,
drum roll. No, you're on, Sharon. Not a drum roll.
Yeah, no drum roll. This is more like the
nightmare.
So House Bill 163, which is on the agenda, is no more. It's actually House Bill 3953, aka Senate Bill 1968. The unfortunate part is they have changed numbers to try to, I don't know if their idea is to trick people so that we think that House Bill 163 doesn't exist anymore, but House Bill 163 was moved into House Bill 3953. And then there's another Senate Bill 1968 as well. So I would like to give a shout out to State Representative Jackie Haas and Senator Patrick Joyce, who I have been in contact with pretty much daily. Both have advised me they were opposed to it. And again, I don't think that anybody is opposed to police reform. I don't think anybody out there is opposed to it. But I think there's a way to do this that we don't have to jam it down people's throat and try and sneak things through at 5 o'clock in the morning. That's just disappointing that our legislature has to work that way. Again, there's no one in law enforcement that opposes police reform. In fact, in our Zoom call with Senator Sims and Senator Joyce and our state's attorney, you know, I said, my belief is that reform is ongoing. It's not something that we just change in the legislative session. Departments within ourselves reform ourselves, at least most places do. The unfortunate part with this bill is that this is strictly a Cook County bill. This is a Chicago police bill. And everybody is jamming all this police reform down the entire state of Illinois' throat because they can't get it right in Chicago. And that's disappointing because we don't operate like Chicago. I don't think anybody else in the state of Illinois operates like Chicago. So that part of it is frustrating. But the fact that they jam this stuff in at 5 in the morning in a 700+ page bill that people have an hour to read, I don't know if anybody's ever sat down and read a bill, but reading a 2-page bill would put you to sleep. I can't imagine a 700+ page bill that you have to sit there and read in an hour. And we wonder why people don't trust government. I mean, that's the ultimate in. So one of the things, and I have a list here somewhere of, and this is all relative to House Bill 163, but so it's really non-existent since House Bill 163 doesn't exist anymore. So, I mean, the only thing I would say in addition is that, and I know Jim spoke on cashless bail. These two stacks of paper are our local inmates that are housed in our facility and what their bonds are and what their offenses are. And you can go down, you know, and I'll just read a few of them. I don't have to go through all 260 of them, but you know, you've got controlled substance trafficking, $100,000 bond. You know, do we want somebody out there trafficking drugs to our kids? Aggravated unlawful use of a weapon, possession of a firearm. Do we want this guy on the street? I mean, I've talked to this committee before, and we talked about what the state's attorney and our office have done with our local inmates and how we go through those that are in our custody without every day, just about once a week, where we identify those who we feel that the state can take a look at and possibly get out of jail. And we suggested that to our state senator, our state rep, and Senator LG Sims, that, you know, you can do something. I mean, people have to stay in jail. I would strongly recommend to our community to get ready. And by get ready, I mean protect yourself. If you don't have cameras on your residence, I would put cameras on your residence. And you need to protect yourself, because it is going to get, as the state's attorney said, violent crime is going to go up significantly, and unfortunately, people are going to be victims who don't deserve to be victims. So now this has to go through the House. It'll go through the House this morning at 8 o'clock. You know, likelihood it'll pass there, and then our governor will more than likely sign it, because he doesn't recognize any law enforcement except the state police. So.
You know, I hear your concerns, but that's you're painting, you know, him with a broad brush in terms of law enforcement. That I'd beg to differ with you there.
Okay.
Let's see if he signs it.
True.
Well, yeah, no, I understand that. I understand that.
Hey, if he doesn't sign it, good for him, but I think he's indicated that he supports
Well,
it, so.
You know, we have control in terms of Jackie and Senator Joyce. You know, he's had a lot of discussions. They have had a lot of discussions with you. You represent law enforcement in this county. You have a substantial role with the Illinois Sheriff's Association. You're held in high regard there. They heard you, and they did the appropriate thing based on the feedback that you gave them. Jim gave them. Other people gave them as well too. FOP, I'm sure, as well too. I've heard about all the phone calls that our local legislators have received. I mean, I would think that all of us need to be in tune in terms of what's going on, you know, initially with House Bill 163. And you may recall in my text to you, I think I said the stuff needs to be separated, right?
No doubt.
And they agreed with that too. Senator said, Hunter, you and I are thinking the same way in that regard. So,
Yep.
so you know, we're just going to have to see what happens in terms of modifying that stuff down the road.
Let's hope we can.
Mr. Wheeler.
I think it's probably appropriate to mention at this point that part of the purview and the mission and really a specific job executive committee is going to have is to produce our lobbyists a legislative agenda and things that we are going to go after, things that we're going to support, things that we're going to do just with Mr. Hunter just said, pick it apart line by line, things that are good and bad, and send them full written recommendations. What this board has voted on as far as what we want to see happen. I think we can talk about it here, but if our senator and our representative and our lobbyist all have exactly what their marching orders are, air quotes, they'll know exactly where we want to go with this stuff from a board perspective.
Right.
And that will go through executive committee. They will develop and write that, and then that will go to the full board for approval. So I hope to have a list together by the end of this month so we can start on that. But this doesn't become law until what, 23? I heard.
23.
Well, I think it's progressive.
Well,
I think it's. as
We
move
have a
forward.
little bit of time, a lot more than they've given us between 5 a.m. and right now, to be able to figure out what that is. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Snipes.
It was an aye vote.
I think the dog is Equal Queen. Yeah. I hear Senator Joyce, I hear Representative Jackie Haas. I also would like to be inclusive because he is part of this county as a representative, Representative Sims. How we have reached out and in his position, because it's going to be critical that when they're up on the floor, that they do argue collaboratively the issues that are germane to Kankakee County. I do know that we throughout the state there's Chicago, and then the rest of us, as they so call, or how they term it. What I would like to see is if there has to be, I know we have Chicago, that's about 3 million, or 3.5 million. The state is 11 million. I wish at some point that we were able to create what they call the downstate coalition, where you have the numbers. When things happen where we have to swallow unfunded mandates and things of this nature from things that Chicago pushed into place, that we have this other 7,000 or at least 6,500 that can oppose it and kind of reach some type of point of equilibrium where they're hearing our voices versus us always saying, as go Chicago, as go the rest of the state.
Any other comments? Moving on to animal control.
Yeah, animal control is, so we actually served a search warrant on a home in Bourbonnais last week. There was a dog found out in the field with its legs zip tied. Charges are certainly pending, but the case is still under investigation. So, but I just want to keep this board aware, this committee aware that animal control is out there doing their best to take care of the animals. So,
Any questions or comments? Anything else for us?
yeah, I got a couple things. This is our notice from the Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police. If you recall, the presidential executive order on safe policing for safe communities, which was an executive order signed by President Trump about the use of force. And you have to have this certification to be eligible for DOJ grant funding, the Department of Justice grant funding. And we got notified that we have met the conditions for certification based on our use of force policies, and that we are eligible for federal grants moving forward, which we have a number of federal grants right now, but had we not done this, we would have not been eligible for grants. So that was completed. Lieutenant Baston did a great job on putting that together, and so that's a positive. And lastly, this is our annual report for 2020. It's not officially out yet. It's still under review. We're still making sure that all the numbers are right and accurate, but it's close. And once we are done with it, we will push it out on our Sheriff's app. That will be available for everybody to take a look at. So,
Mr. Snipes.
Sheriff, generally as a rule, the executive orders go out when the president goes out. Will that executive order and the basis of that grant still be valid?
I'm assuming so. I mean, I think the incoming president has to change those executive orders. I mean, I think they're good until the next president changes them. So, I highly doubt that he will come in and change something, especially dealing with excessive force.
Oh.
Any other questions or comments for the sheriff? Thank you.
Thanks again for the glasses, Tom. They look better on you, I'm sure.
Up next, we have the coroner's report. Mr. Cavender.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Just a few highlights from our December report.
Can you get closer to your mic?
Yep. Let's try. Is that better? How's that better?
You guys hear him all right? Go ahead.
Okay. Few highlights from our December report. We had 154 total calls in the month. Keep in mind that when Coroner Gessner spoke in December, he had said that our busiest month ever on record was November, where we had 155 calls, so we fell one short of that all-time record again. Autopsies went up to 15. Something concerning that happened in December was the amount of overdoses we had already this year. We've confirmed 3, and we have another probable 3 that are pending that will more than likely fall into that tally as well. Of the 3 that we've confirmed, fentanyl was a contributing drug in all 3 of those. As far as COVID update for this year so far, we've had 44 deaths that have been attributed to COVID-19 since December 1st. 38 of those have been in December and 6 in January. The average age is 77. There have been 27 males, 17 females, 34 Caucasian, 9 African Americans, and 1 Hispanic. That's all that really I have to report on the December report, unless anybody has any questions about that.
Any questions on the December report? Monthly receipts?
Nothing to report there. Standard.
And your 2020 annual report?
Okay. Thank you, Kelly, for emailing that out to everybody on the county board. For anybody else who wants to see that, that is available on our website, www.kankakeecountycoroner.org. You can go on there. It's right at the top of the homepage for everybody to see. Just going to hit a few of the highlights for the sake of time. Report kind of starts out with our staffing. I know that Coroner Gessner speaks a lot about how proud of his staff he is, and I would echo those same sentiments. I tallied up yesterday, and we have 101 years of total experience in our department. The average employee has 11.2 years of service. Longest employee has been here 37 years. We all know who that is. And the shortest employee has been here for 2 years. So a wide range of skills and experience that make us all complement each other well and perform well as a team. You'll see in our report that our calls for service in fiscal year 2020 were up the highest we've ever had. It's up 159 calls over fiscal year 2019. We averaged 116 calls per month. Fewest calls occurred in July when there were 89, and the most in November, like I just mentioned, at 155. Autopsies for fiscal year 2020 were up as well. We were up 25 over 2019. Likely cause of that is the number of overdoses, which increased significantly from 2019 to 2020. Let's see here. Our autopsy and morgue expenditures were again a significant portion of our budget last year. We haven't received the final numbers yet. However, I anticipate that we will be under budget, which is always good. One thing that helped us significantly was the funding that the county received as part of the CARES Act. We were able to spend a significant amount of money buying PPE and other supplies that we would need that has enabled us to be pretty well stocked going into fiscal year 2021. We'll continue to look and research and try to find supplies as we need them and stay under budget obviously as well. Happy to report, as the sheriff mentioned as well, that our motor vehicle fatalities were down in 2020 from 2019. Also down were the number of suicides in 2020 over 2019. So both of those are positive trends that hopefully will continue. Unfortunately, as was also discussed earlier in the meeting, homicides doubled this year from 2019 to 2020. We went from 4 in 2019 to 8 in 2020. And I did some research while the meeting was going on, and 7 of those 8 homicides occurred within the city of Kankakee. Keep in mind too that there may have been more if, for example, somebody was shot in Kankakee or the county and transported to a Chicago hospital and died there. That would count as a homicide for the police agency, but not for us. So that number could be a little bit different potentially. As far as overdoses, there was a 72% increase in overdoses from fiscal year 2019 to fiscal year 2020, where we had 50 total. Keep in mind 2017 was the record at 56, so we came really close to hitting that unfortunate record again. The average age of our overdoses was 40 years old, youngest victim 17, the oldest 51. There were 37 males, 13 females, 40 Caucasian, 9 African American, and 1 other. Of the 50 overdoses, fentanyl was listed on 33 of those death certificates. Cocaine and heroin were also significant drugs that played a role in a number of those deaths. Fentanyl was the only drug in 12 of the 50 overdoses we had. And per capita, with our average of 109,000 residents or so, our OD rate was 45.5, compared to Will County with roughly 690,000 residents and a per capita there of 15.2. So overdoses continue to be a problem here in our county that we're going to have to continue to work on moving forward. In fiscal year 2020, there were 9 organ donors in our county and 28 tissue donors. The great thing, 1 donor has the opportunity to enhance or save the lives of up to 25 people. So obviously we can continue to increase that number, the better off we are. You can go to our website and sign up to be an organ donor. You can go to the Secretary of State's website to do that as well. I encourage anybody to do that. Also in 2020, we issued more cremation permits than we ever have before. Cremation rate was about 60%, which is up from 52% in 2017. Likely cause of that, probably the COVID pandemic. People couldn't have funeral services and things like that, so they opted to go for a cremation, which obviously increased our number there. And then finally, the COVID update for fiscal year 2020. We had 125 COVID deaths in fiscal year 2020. The first death occurred on April 1st, and the last was on November 29th. There were 66 males and 59 females. 16% of the deaths were African Americans, 77% Caucasian, 6% Hispanic, and 1% Asian Indian. The average age of all those deaths was 80 years old. The youngest decedent we had was 38, and the oldest was 100. The most common ages were 84 and 86, with 8 decedents in each age. There were 29 deaths in April, 28 deaths in May, 7 in June, 2 in July, 4 in August, 4 in September, 6 in October, and then 45 in November. The most deaths that we had occurred on November 28th when we had 5 people die due to COVID illness. So those are the highlights of the report. Again, it's online. If anybody has any specific questions, please let us know. We'll be more than happy to answer them, or if you want us to dig deeper for some more information, we can do that as well.
Mr. Wheeler.
Thank you. Not to lessen any or give the impression there's any false impact of COVID within the community, but has there been any cases? Because for the longest time there were 0 cases from your office reported that didn't have a comorbidity. Is that still the case?
That is so correct.
So there's been when I say comorbidity, it's something substantial. It's not a hangnail. It's it's something that is a substantial health issue.
People that have conditions such as COPD, hypertension, asthma, those types of chronic long-term conditions, and we're still seeing that with every COVID death.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Long.
Thank you. Thank you, Ed. Just a comment. I read the entire report that someone painstakingly put together, and I think it instills a lot of confidence. I'm not surprised. It instills a lot of confidence in your office down there, and if you haven't read the report, it's quite nice and gives you a clear understanding of what you guys do down there.
Thank you. And we keep our website up to date daily too. So it's anybody at any point can go online and you can get a good glimpse of what's really going on, what we're seeing, and if there's something, like I mentioned, if there's something more that you want to see, let us know and we'll be more than happy to work to get that done.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? If your boss happens to be watching, happy birthday again.
Thank you. I'll let him know.
Okay. All right. We have a motion to combine all the reports. We'll take a roll call vote.
Mr. Hess?
Aye.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Mr. Lear?
Yes.
Mr. Snipes? Ms. Peters?
Aye.
Ms. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield?
Aye.
Mr. Carrico?
Aye.
Mr. Eckhoff?
Aye.
Mr. Daryl Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Kirkstra?
Aye.
Mr. Hunter? Mr. Collins?
Aye.
Mr. Kenneth Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Is there any old business to come before the committee? Any old business? Any new business to come before the committee? Mr. Wheeler.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, because I got the notices that this bill was going to be going through at 5 a.m. From a county board perspective, I'd always try to frame it in what's our purview. What should be most concerned with? Not as a citizen, I'm really concerned with the policing aspect. Justice being blind now, it's kneecapped and all of that kind of stuff. But as far as what we have to do, I want to let the board know that we don't set policy for policing. That's up to the sheriff. We don't set policy for the state's attorney. That's up to the courts and the Supreme Court and all that kind of stuff. The way they do their own things, it's their own area. I stand with them on that aspect, and I support what they recommend to this board. But from a financial aspect, all of those department heads and everybody here and everybody in the community needs to understand that everything that they have just done is unfunded.
Correct.
They're shoving it down to us to gather the money that used to be paid for from bail bond type activities or fees and fines. They're no longer going to be that way. So as we keep picking people up for an offense and then not showing up for the trial and then not showing up, or not showing up for not showing up, and that circle keeps continuing. That's cost, where there's no recouping any way to pay for it. And so I need to know, the board needs to know what grants have been lost by all department heads that are associated with criminal justice and really anything else, because now we have to pick up that cost. All local matches for all of the grants, all the soft money that Mr. Hunter was talking about. We potentially and quite likely will not have that money anymore. So all of the work that we're doing to try to keep people out of the system, that discretionary money that we said we want for interactions with high school students that are brushing up against the law, you know, the specialty courts, even how we fund public defenders, how we fund all of this stuff, court security, everything is tied to this bill that passed in the pre-dawn hours with the roosters crowing. That part is offensive, but the reality is it's going to gut the things that we were doing as a bipartisan board to impact communities of color, or for issues that impact communities of color. We were doing those things here with the state's attorney and the county board. We decided we wanted to fund this stuff. That's gone. Okay, I want people to understand that. The good work that we were doing, the money that we devoted to Mr. Rowe's office, that's gonna be gone. There's no, that has to go to fund court operations. The special funds that are filled up with funds to buy computers for the circuit clerk or for the, well, not the recorder, that's a different revenue stream. But you know, the court security fees and all of those things, well, there's salaries being paid out of those special funds as well, legally, mind you, but so how do we pay for those employees now that those funds are gone? And that will impact court operations at a time that it's already stressed with a backlog that's, what, 9 months old?
9 months.
This does just the opposite outside of Cook County of what its intention is to do. And you're kneecapping law enforcement, I'm setting that aside, okay? We can all have a difference of opinion, and as the sheriff said, there needs to be reform there, and continual. But what we have to worry about as county board members, this is an all-out assault on the finances and the good work which we've already started doing here. How are we gonna pay for this stuff? So we need to think about that because there is no answer to that. Completely, totally unfunded. And we saw what those cashless bail has done, you know, for us already for the last, what, 2 years?
2 years.
So we have a severe financial strain in the court systems because we're not able to collect for people paying the fine for doing the crime. I just want to mention that because there's going to be a lot coming in the next few months about what the impact is going to be, very specific down to the fund level. Can we afford that local match of the 20% of the good work that we're doing? Sorry, not if it's to pay for a clerk to run a courtroom. You see the choices we're faced with. Thank you. Oh, by the way, what's the point of a warrant anymore? What is the point of a warrant? I'll just mention that. So that cost should go down because we probably shouldn't serve any, since we know that they're just going to get let back out again.
Mr. Snipes.
While I do agree in part that the procedures and process is ultimately the responsibility of the elected officials and their respective departments, I differ in that the county purse strings are ultimately our responsibility. And I think that there should be a strong resolution that is sent to each of our county representatives to echo the concerns of the county when laws are passed or legislations are passed and they embark upon the county's purse string when there is no other revenue source that's going to come and, I guess, kind of assist us with these unfunded mandates. So at some point, until we screen and downstate screen those individuals that are being affected and saying, how do you think that we're going to fund these mandates when sometimes we do have a voice, because they're going to argue that we do have a voice through our legislators. So we need that voice to become a collective voice, because I know it's not only unique to Kankakee County, but to the other counties that exist, that how are we going to pay for all of this? If you take the monies, if you give us these elaborate responsibilities, financial responsibilities, how then are we going to pay for it? Did you ever think of that when you sat at the table and created these new bills?
It's been going on for years. Any other new business? Mr. Kirkstra?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we close.
Is there a second? Mr. Long with a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion